Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Eden Eye Tarot, where we illuminate your stars and your cards. My name is Micah. I will be your tarot reader and astrologer for today. This is the tarot and astro weather for the week of November 11th. Now, we are starting a day late. And I do appreciate everybody that's been super patient with me getting this video out. We've been consistent so far, with the exception of last week. But last week, I feel like we all just needed a break. Last week was a lot for everybody. But I hope everyone is doing well. We are going to get into the cards as well as the astrology of this week. So get out your planners, your wine, your snacks, whatever that you need. If you do like to write out the tarot cards for each day that I will be listing, as well as the tarot card slash cards, because we actually have two cards for the week today. And so we are going to be going over that. If you like to write all that down, write yourself out some little tips and reminders. Get out your planners. But other than that, get comfortable and let's get into it. But before we do, if you could give me a like, share, subscribe, I would really appreciate that. We are trying to get this channel to grow to 1,000 subscribers by March 10th, 2025, which is my birthday. If you want to give me a free birthday card, not free birthday card. I mean, you could. You could. If you want to give me a free birthday present, tell a friend to tell a friend. Other than that, let's go ahead and get into the tarot of the week before we get into the tarot of the day, the tarot cards of the day. So, like I mentioned before, we have two tarot cards rather than just one describing the energy of this week. So, we have Temperance. We also have the Eight of Swords, which I really like this pairing because temperance is associated with Jupiter energy in particular. It's really associated very closely with Sagittarius. And the Eight of Swords is actually the Jupiter in Gemini card, where we currently have Jupiter in Gemini. And so I really like this pairing because it's talking, I think, a lot about the intense communications that I think we're going to see this week in particular. With temperance, temperance is about calm, but and patience as well, and waiting. But I think also when I look at temperance, I think of not going to extremes, not letting anyone push you to extremes in particular, finding your stillness, not letting anybody shake you, finding that calm within yourself. For anybody that has read Akatar, I'm probably going to butcher this quote, but in the A Court of Silver Flames, there is a quote from that book that says, "I am the rock against which the surf pushes," something like that. I told you I was going to butcher it, but y'all know what I mean. But basically, finding your stillness, not letting anybody wear you down or push you outside of your character is my big thing. Especially when it comes to fear. I think a lot of times we can get into places where we either put ourselves into a very fearful space, which does push us to maybe go to extremes or act outside of our character, but also other people's words also can influence us to do that, or it kind of pushes us to make those thoughts spiral a little bit more in our own heads, and it can push us to act against our own kind of best interest. And so that's what I really see when I look at these two cards in particular. It's about finding the calm. Jupiter in Gemini is very busy. And the Eight of Swords is there to remind us, even though we might feel very backed into a corner. With these two cards, it makes me think of this quote I won't butcher. Watch me do it though. When a dog is backed into a corner, it starts biting. That's what these two cards give me, is the warning against that. If you feel trapped this week, Temperance is saying, do not let the, I guess, facade of feeling trapped make you lash out in a way that you usually wouldn't. Keep your cool, keep your calm. You can only control so much. You can only control yourself. And I think that's really what Temperance and the Eight of Swords are there to talk about. Because with the Eight of Swords, it is a feeling of feeling trapped. But the beautiful thing about the Eight of Swords is that it's all in our head. The cage is in here. It's not a physical thing. We are the only ones kind of trapping ourselves in the situation, or at least we are the only ones allowing ourselves to feel trapped. The Eight of Swords is more of like, I think I say this with a lot of cards, but I think it's so true. It's a change in perspective is all you need to be able, or to challenge those negative thoughts, or like self doubting thoughts, is all you need to kind of like to kind of break apart the cage of your own making. Sorry, I am struggling with words. We are getting closer and closer to Mercury retrograde, and words are escaping me. Anyway, that is the energy that I want you to keep in mind. That is what we are walking into this week. But I think with Temperance being the major arcana card, I think this is the one that we need to be most aware of, is not being pushed to a place where we might regret later. Taking our time, finding balance can really be so important this week. And really just finding that calm within ourselves, as opposed to the Eight of Swords, where everything is so busy. It's a bit more stormy. When we look at like even the original Rider Waite, it's like a storm is brewing on the Eight of Swords card. Not in this illustration, obviously, because this is a different deck. But it's such a big difference between the Temperance cards imagery and the Eight of Swords cards in imagery, much like Jupiter and Gemini, as well as Sagittarius and Jupiter and Gemini. And so just keep that in mind. Affirmations, as well as like lavender essential oils, could be really helpful during this week. Those are all things that are associated with Mercury. I think when we're talking about Jupiter and Gemini, it's like, what do you believe? What kind of words are you believing? And that's why I say affirmations can be really helpful this week. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the astro weather and the tarot weather for each day of this week. All right, so we are starting out with Monday, November 11th. We will have the moon still in Pisces. It's actually sandwiched right in between Saturn and Neptune. And so when we have the moon in Pisces, we are looking at Jupiter as the ruler of this day. And so, or I guess of the past like day and a half. Yeah, because it's moving out of Aries tonight, like around 10:50-ish, for those of you that are on the East Coast. And so we have kind of been in this energy since Saturday-ish. But when we have the moon in Pisces and it's ruled by Jupiter and Gemini, we can see a lot of like internal thinking going on, a lot of reflection, because the moon is in between Saturn and Neptune. One, I think a lot of daydreaming is going on, a lot of wanting to be isolated, especially on Sunday. I think Sunday was a really good day for just kind of staying at home, watching TV, eating bonbons. But we do see that the moon is, square to its own ruler. And when we have that, I think what we see, especially with that square that's also coming from Mercury and Sagittarius, is wanting to stay in, wanting to isolate, wanting to brood a little bit, because let's be honest, Saturn, like being that close to the moon with Neptune, like Saturn and Neptune sandwiching the moon like that, does cause some very moody and broody kind of emotions, and just kind of wanting to be away from people. But it can, with those squares to Mercury and Jupiter, that's in a Mercury ruled sign, it can be like, people won't stop calling you, or you're getting a lot of text messages and you're just trying to sleep, or you are having to leave the house for some reason, or you're having to spend maybe some extra money, since at the time of this recording, and of course Sunday, Venus is still in Sagittarius, and so it can be like having to spend money to get something delivered to you. And so while you might be able to stay at home, it comes at some sort of like literal cost. It could also be other than like just getting a lot of messages from people when you're trying to just not talk to people. It can be like having to leave the house and travel for necessities, like let's say grocery shopping, for instance, because that's a very Gemini thing, having to run errands. You're trying to do all the broody things and you're like, crap, I don't have any groceries for this week. I need to go grocery shopping. And that takes you outside. So, with that being said, I think Sunday and Monday in particular are days where we can see a lot of times people not being very conscious of our emotions or how our words affect them, or how their demands are kind of affecting our emotions. And I say this is vice versa. You could be the one that is, doing this as well. And I say that because the moon, Saturn, and Neptune are making an energetic square to, or as even as the moon gets closer to Neptune, both Neptune and the moon start to make a square with Venus. And so there's a little bit of entitlement going on. And people can, be very nitpicky, or not even nitpicky. It's just, yeah, like people can be a bit oblivious to how we feel in a situation. And so I think that is definitely the mood of Sunday, as well as a bit like of hangover on Monday. On Monday, which is obviously today, we do see Venus go into the sign of Capricorn, where we see the theme of less is more come into play. Whenever Venus is in Capricorn, Venus is going into a sign that's ruled by Saturn. And so it puts a little bit of restriction on Venus things. And so, as far as relationships, it can be, maybe a little bit of intensity or high expectations when it comes to the relationships that you are engaging in, or wanting to achieve certain relationships, even advantageous relationships. It can be like wanting to go out and network. It can be great energy for, I guess, getting closer to authority figures or bosses, or having an easier time forming relationships with those kinds of people. Venus in Capricorn can also be a time where we're budgeting a lot more, where we're looking for a bargain, especially when we start to get into the moon going into Taurus. I think that becomes definitely more of a theme. Um, when we see Venus as well, like Venus in Capricorn as well, it's about commitment. What kind of, not only the great expectations that we're holding relationships to, but also what kind of commitments do we have? Like which relationships are meant to be long lasting and which ones do we kind of need to let go? Since Saturn is limiting, it wants the best when it comes to Venus. It wants quality over quantity. And so just keep that in mind as we do see Venus go into Capricorn. Venus in Capricorn can also just be like I was saying before, it can be like, relationships, being a little bit sweeter with authority figures or bosses. But it can also be like you meet somebody, depending on your rising sign, it can be somebody that you meet somebody that's older than you that you find like a connection with. And so just keep that in mind as Venus transits the sign of Capricorn. So, when we're looking at Monday for the card, we have the King of Swords. The King of Swords is about action. It's about kind of distancing yourself, much like the Saturn, Moon, Neptune aspect of things. But it's in particular, it's about distancing ourselves emotionally, to be able to kind of see things a bit clearer, or to be able to make clear decisions. And I think that is one thing that can really come other than brooding. That's something that's very positive that I think can come out of the Saturn, Moon, Neptune kind of thing, because Saturn is creating almost like a bit of a reality check, or like a get serious kind of energy when we're talking about the sign of Pisces. And so while it is still daydreamy, it is still it can be very escapist, but I think the positive way that energy can be harnessed is, the ability to separate the emotions from a situation, to be able to look at it more objectively, to look at it almost like more like from a Virgo standpoint. You can look at it that way. I look at it more from a grounded Mercury perspective. And that's why I think the King of Swords is coming up. But the King of Swords is also about action, and it's about striking while the iron is hot. And I think we're figuring out when to strike during Sunday as well as Monday, or at least strategizing our actions, making some sort of plans. And I think that really goes hand in hand with the daydreaming. Daydreaming can go hand in hand with strategy, or planning something. When we are looking at air energy, which is the King of Swords, it is about like mastering that energy. And so it can be making plans. It can be about, it's about intellect as well as communication. And so, like we were talking about, it can be like, people, you know, even if you don't want to talk to people, it can be very much like people wanting to talk to you. And I think the King of Swords is really good about setting its boundaries with others. It can, maintain connections, and it can be very charismatic, but it is a bit cold. And so I think that's the energy we're in for Saturday and Sunday. But it's not devoid of emotion. You can set boundaries without hurting others, especially as Venus goes into Capricorn. I think that's what we're seeing a lot, is the need to set boundaries. It can be also be, even though this isn't the King of Pentacles, I think the King of Swords and Venus going into Capricorn kind of also are very friendly together. These two energies are very friendly together because they're looking at goal achievement and when to achieve goals, planning goals. It's almost like very much visionary, almost like Aquarius energy. And Aquarius is traditionally ruled by Saturn as well. And so it's asking, where do we want to go? How do we want to achieve those things? And I think that's what we're really looking at for Monday. All right, so we have Tuesday, where we see the moon solidly in the sign of Aries. This is a day where you want to watch out for your ego. This is a day it gets a bit intense as far as dealing with others. People are feeling a bit feisty. It gives very much look at me energy. And I say that because the moon will be crossing over the North Node, which is where we want more of something. Aries is the conqueror, it is the achiever, almost in the same way as Capricorn, but it's almost just a little bit more brutal, and a little bit more impulsive. It's not thinking about the long term of a situation, it's thinking about the right now, right here, right now. What am I going to enact right now? And it almost tries to like usurp some things. And so it's a little bit more brutal. And we are expanding on that when the moon is crossing over the North Node, and the moon is our emotions. And so it can be a lot of, feeling like you just want more. You aren't thinking about the long term effects of how your feistiness or your ambition will affect you or possibly other people. But Aries also wants to be the boss. It's the first. And so it's going to be the pioneer, and it's going to say, like, and that's why I say it's like very much like, look at me energy. But it's also coming into a conjunction with Chiron as well. And so we can see some bruised egos when we're called out, for sure. And I say that also because we do have a moon square that's going on to Venus. And so bossiness can happen, or some power struggles when it does come to like just kind of overdoing it in our relationships, or trying to dominate others too much, or trying to be the boss too much, to the point where it hinders relationships. Capricorn and Aries have that same thing in common, where they want to be the boss of things, but it can be taking it too far, or it can be very much like, wanting to start a relationship quickly. Remember the things that start fast and fast. Or, just feeling like you want to start that relationship because, of course, the moon is still your emotions. It's also your habits as well. And so that habit of kind of like trying to spark things off very quickly, or feeling just very impulsive, can shake things up to a very stable relationship, or a relationship that you maybe thought was stable, and you kind of end up with your foot needing to be put into your mouth. People's tempers I think, are really going to be interesting today. We also have this Saturn Mercury square going on as well, where I think we'll see some fact checking, but I also think we see a lot of confusion. Mercury retrograde isn't here yet, but that Saturn square Mercury, I think, brings on the same kind of vibe. People aren't clicking with you as fast as you would like them to. And I think I can see a lot of people getting impatient with the moon making so many squares and aspects to other planets in Aries. But I also say that because the moon is making a trine to Mercury in Sagittarius. And so it wants everything right now. It's instant gratification. And so I really want you to, again, really pay attention to how these possibly sparks of inspiration, or these very quick tempers affect relationships that could be very productive, um, and that you need. Uh, because Capricorn, I think, is really good at being the boss, but I think Capricorn understands that it can't do everything alone, despite maybe trying to do everything alone. It does understand that it needs a team. I always say that Capricorns, they do a lot, they achieve a lot, but a Capricorn will probably be the first one to tell you that they hired some help. If they can afford the help, they hired the help because they like to be practical. Um, and you're not thinking practically this day. People are not thinking practically this day. And so there's a lot of impulsivity this day, both with people's actions as well as their emotions. And so I definitely watch out for aggressive drivers, not just on the roads, but just out in the world with people. I think I worded that sentence so weird. So yeah, watch out for impulsive drivers. I think drivers can be a bit more aggressive today, because we have the moon also making a trine not only to Mercury in Sagittarius, where we have travel or beliefs. And so this can be somebody, emotionally driving and wanting to kind of supersede you, when we have that trine to Leo, Mars and Leo. And so it'd be like, I deserve to be in front of you. And so therefore I will be, but they're not paying attention to what is happening around them. And it can easily cause um, some sort of um, some sort of issue that creates an expense that you have to pay for, which is that moon square Neptune energy. It's basically saying your impulsive actions have consequences, pricey consequences. Some of the best lessons in life sometimes are pricey, especially as we get older. And I think that's the perfect kind of analogy for that moon in Aries square Venus in Capricorn. We also see the moon making a sextile to Jupiter in Gemini, which I think is just kind of adding on to this whole I want to be the boss energy, and people not being afraid to say it and be bossy. I don't think that people are very aware of how their words and their actions are, and what they want is affecting others. I think it's very much a blinders on kind of day. They're like, I want this done, do it. Think the devil card. If anybody has ever had a reading with me, whenever the devil card comes up, I talk about this. It's like a boss that wants the end result, and they do not care how they talk to you. They do not care if your kids need to be picked up. They do not care if you are having a mental breakdown. They want it done. They do not care how you feel in the midst of it. They just want it done. That is Tuesday. Ironically, Tuesday for the card of the day, we have the Three of Pentacles, which is about working together. So I think this is more a card that's just trying to express how you should go into today thinking, or the energy that you should bring into today. The Three of Pentacles, one is saying that on the end of what you're going into, you cannot avoid working with other people. And so do your best to try and find the positives of their perspective. And Pentacles are slow, they're earth energy. And so I think when working with others, take your time when expressing, excuse me, really harness that. I think that moon Mercury aspect where we are singing, or sorry, not the moon Mercury aspect, the Saturn square Mercury aspect, where we are taking a bit longer to craft our response to things. We're not impulsively, we're just responding. We are taking our time to figure out how to word things. We're being very strategic about our choices as well as our way of communicating with others. And I think that's really why the Three of Pentacles is coming up, is trying to find one, the beauty in different people's perspectives. You're all just trying to build the same thing. And to do that, you have to understand each person's perspective, or at the very least, you have to understand that everyone is trying to build the same thing, and understand where a person is coming from. I think that's the most productive way to go about it. And the Three of Pentacles is really stressing that different viewpoints make the dream work. The teamwork does indeed make the dream work. And so that's what I get for Tuesday. All right. On Wednesday, we basically have the same kind of energy carrying over from Tuesday. We've got big egos. But I think this particular day, we can see more bruised egos more than anything. The moon will be square. I don't have it circled, but the moon will be square Pluto, because it's on its way out of Aries, and it will be square Pluto in Capricorn. And so we can see some intense emotions today. This day in particular, because Mars is the ruler of the moon, and we see the moon in a sextile with Jupiter and Gemini. I think we see a lot of tyrannical vibes kind of going on. It's giving temper tantrum. It's giving bruised ego. And the more an ego is bruised, the louder people get and the more feisty and angry and possibly violent that they get, especially because it's at a two. I want you to remember, when we look at like twos with degrees, we're thinking about Taurus energy. Taurus is a fixed sign, and it's more concerned about what makes it comfortable, what's going to bring it comfort, or resources. But more than anything, a fixed energy is building momentum. And so, whatever, especially coming right off of that moon North Node conjunction with a moon Chiron conjunction now happening, which is why I say bruised egos are happening, or there's some sort of like disillusion with sense of self, um, or some sort of identity crisis. Even headaches or like head injuries can happen this day. Again, be careful about how fast you're moving, Tuesday and Wednesday in particular. But it can be a day where we're seeing just a lot of people grasping for power. A lot of greed is happening this day. And whether it's getting exposed or not, we'll see, because even though Mars isn't making any sort of direct square with the sun, um, and I look at the sun because Mars is in the sun's sign of Leo, and we see the sun at a 21 in Scorpio, and 21 is the Sagittarius degree, and so it can be bringing the light to things. Um, Whether it'll be exposed or not, kind of what is really happening when it comes to um, like possible abuse that's happening, either behind the scenes or like right in front of us. I do wonder if that will happen. But I think it's just kind of like a day where greed is just kind of running rampant, both from an emotional standpoint, and from just kind of like an ambition standpoint. And so, ironically, also, all these cards are so weird for today. We have the Nine of Cups. I think the Nine of Cups is usually a very positive card, and it's wish fulfillment. And honestly, I think the Nine of Cups is more of a warning. Don't get drunk on your own ego, because while you may get what you want, you might be also sacrificing something else. With the Nine of Cups, it is very, I think with this energy, it's very much like, I got what I wanted, Yeah, but you left a whole bunch of dead bodies in your wake, and so or hurt feelings in your wake. In it can I just say, yeah, just be very careful. With this fire energy, all this fire energy, going on, I would, especially with the sextile to Jupiter and Gemini, I think that working out or getting active, having your hands busy, finding new ways to challenge yourself and doing different projects can be a great way to work off excess aggression, um, and not aim it towards the wrong people. Um, Keeping yourself busy, especially building up heat in the body, can be something that is very beneficial to kind of cool things down when it comes to relationships with other people. All right, so we have Thursday, where we have the moon has moved into Taurus, and it is square Mars. Whenever I see moon square Mars, it is a day where people hurt your feelings, where people are not afraid to hurt your feelings, or there can be some sort of relational issue. And I mean, it's not surprising, especially because the moon is in the opposite sign of the sun, and so something is a bit off when it comes to our actions versus how we feel. And whenever we have that kind of internal conflict, a lot of times we can take it out on other people. But what I do like, obviously, is that the moon and Venus are in a trine. And so it can be a time where, you can do like a little bit of retail therapy, but you're definitely looking for a bargain. It can be a time where you maybe are spending a little bit less money, or I don't know, actually, Moon and Taurus gives me more like bargain energy, not necessarily looking to budget. Even though we do have the moon being ruled by Venus and it's in Capricorn. And so I think it's like saving up for something that is really important to you, or saving up for a goal. Um, and moon square Mars and Leo can be possibly some sort of hindrance of those savings, or kind of having a setback that comes from those savings as well. Um, when I look at moon square Mars, other than hurt feelings, what I think about in like with this aspect too is because Mars in Leo gives me like haircut energy, and because we have the moon in a Venus ruled sign, it can be a time where we literally decide to cut things off when it comes to like a relationship, or we decide to change our appearance and like cut our hair or something like that, make some sort of aesthetic change. And I say that also because Venus is in Capricorn, a Saturn ruled sign. And so it can be like shedding something. So shedding a relationship, or wanting to cut off a relationship or cut off certain parts of a relationship. And I said at the beginning of this week, I'm like, I think a lot of this week will be about, um, not going to extremes, or at the very least, setting our boundaries, learning how to set healthy boundaries. Um, and I think that's something that's really coming up the closer that we get to the full moon in Taurus. Whenever we do have the moon in Taurus, we want to indulge in our comforts. That's something that can definitely happen, even though the moon is, or even though Venus is in Capricorn, but it's very much like quality over quantity. Less is more, again. And so, with that being said, I think with Mars being in Leo, it can also be, a kind of like selfish action, or just kind of like very dramatic action. And the moon in Taurus is not that. People being overly dramatic and therefore hurting someone's feelings, um, it's just a very intense week this week. It's all the feels. We're already in an intense time because the sun is in Scorpio. But I did want to just kind of look at that because the sun is obviously traditionally ruled by Mars, and we have the moon at this time ruled by Venus, and we have the moon opposite the sun. And so we have lots of two pairs of planetary opposites going on. And those energetic opposites are obviously going to be very relational. And that's why I say it has a lot to do with your relationship. So relationships can either be transformed or come to a kind of breaking point when it comes to how, we talk to each other, how we act out towards each other. It can just be very explosive energy, especially as we get to the next day, which is the moon in Taurus that will be conjunct Uranus. Now, when we look at the tarot card that we have for Thursday, we have the Seven of Wands, which is honestly, this is the first card that makes sense to me for this card. But we have the Seven of Wands. The Seven of Wands is about trying to stay on top of things. It can be a time where we're feeling a bit defensive, but it can also be a time where we're seeing the most haters, which makes sense with that Moon Mars square. It can be a time where we are really rising above, which would be that moon aspect to Venus, where we're really doing well, but not everybody is happy for us, and people try and kind of like block your shine. But I think with this, it can also just be like multitasking. The original Rider Waite deck has an illustration of a man like having a stick, and he looks like he's trying to like balance on the world. And so it can be just like a very busy time. And so you might not have a lot of time you might not have a lot of downtime at all during this time. You're just very busy and you're trying to stay on top of things constantly. And so just keep that in mind as you go into Thursday. So when we look at the full moon in Taurus, this full moon in Taurus, as you guys know, we are not going to be talking about the full moon in Taurus in this video. The full moon in Taurus will have its own video. And so I'm not going to talk about it, but I will talk about the tarot card that I get for the full moon in Taurus. We see the Eight of Swords again. Remember that you are only as blocked as you think you are. You are only as caged as you think you are. I think fear, especially more than anything, with the sun at in Scorpio and both the sun and moon at a 24, you're having to give up something. So what are you afraid to give up? What are you afraid to lose? Because with that conjunction with the moon and Uranus, it can be sudden. It can be, having to do with our friends, our allies. But the Eight of Swords is really saying, do not doubt yourself. Take the chance, Uranus. Don't be afraid to let things go, to let something else in. So keep that in mind for Friday, which is going to be the new moon in Taurus. Finally, we have Saturday. Saturday, we have the moon in Gemini. Anytime the moon is in Gemini, we're doing lots of talking. We're doing lots of multitasking. We're doing a lot of moving around and, just receiving messages as well as communicating to others as well. We need to look at Mercury, which is actually we see Mercury that is actually opposite, coming into an exact opposition. And we've been feeling this basically all week already, but it's just coming into its perfection on Saturday. But we've been kind of feeling it all week. Mercury in Sagittarius, which is the ruler of the moon, is making an opposition to Jupiter in Gemini. And so if there is like some sort of conflict of beliefs between us and another person, or like, just kind of internally that we're dealing with, I think it's really, Gemini is a mutable sign. And so it can be very much like big picture versus little picture. That has nothing to do with Gemini being a mutable sign. It was just an extra thought that I had before I talked about the mutableness of Gemini and Sagittarius. And so it's duality. And so I think I was talking to a family member of mine, and they're Gemini, and they were talking about how a friend of theirs or a coworker of theirs was saying that Geminis always like blow up. And I was explaining to this family member, it's not that Geminis blow up. It's that they have hummingbird energy. And when they realize when you're talking to them that that they've said their 2 cents and you want to keep talking about it, then they get frustrated because they're like, I've already moved on from this. What is happening right now? Then the blow up happens. And I think that's like maybe like a nice way to look at this Mercury Jupiter opposition, is it can be like repeating thoughts or rehashing certain beliefs and debate. Anytime we have Mercury energy, we're having some sort of debate, especially when it's in an opposition. It's going to be relational, and so it's like, do you believe that you can achieve this? Do you believe that we should be taking this travel trip? Do you believe that we should be making this money? Travel delays can happen all of this week. I think, especially when we're talking about the full moon in Taurus, it can be like, losing out on certain investments that come with travel. Um, I think, yeah, just make sure everyone has travel insurance on their trips. If you don't have it already, it's something that I would take into account, because eventually Mercury will move into an exact square at an 18, which is a Virgo degree. And so, again, we were talking about being very careful and slow to answer when it comes to our responses to people. And it can just be a lot of like, talking too much, oversharing can be another way that we can look at that Mercury um, and Jupiter opposition. And it can also be people preaching at us, which can also cause some conflict as well. Um, then, of course, we have the Sun opposite Uranus. Sun in Scorpio is moody. It is intense. It's more reflective. It wants to dig up all the things and ask, what are you afraid of? Um, Uranus in Taurus is the happening that pushes you outside of that comfort zone, into that fear zone where maybe it's uncomfortable and you're forced to actually think about, why am I uncomfortable with this? Why do I fear this? Um, a big part of Uranus is mental health. And so I think there can be like, some mental health crises that we see with this opposition, or there can be like some transformations or conflicts with friends, because Uranus is our friend groups or just kind of like our communities that we associate with. So it can be a transformation of those communities that we're in. It can be a breaking up of us and those communities. These two oppositions, Mercury and Jupiter, and then Sun and Uranus, it also gives me very much, I'm special. I'm too special for all of this kind of thing. And I think that that's something that we definitely could see. It gives very much like nose up in the air, kind of stuck up energy. Um, and I think it all comes back to what is are we able to have conversations that kind of open us up to being vulnerable about that? It can be a great time for talk therapy if the tempers aren't just flying. But also it can be a great time of confusion because you're trying to ferret out, why am I triggered by this? And so Saturday, I think, is a bit of a calmer day, only because from the moon going from Taurus into um, Gemini, it can be a time where we see a bit of stability, and then actually figuring out the way to best to enact that stability, or the best way to like figuring out what are our options. There we go. I think that can be something that can be very positive that comes out of this. But I do think mental health can be just really hard on this day, and I think it could be a day where people are having a bit of cognitive dissonance for sure. Whether it come through being pushed out of their comfort zone into, some real fears that they might have with resources and money, or it comes through like certain words that come from leaders, or words that come from like our um, our spiritual groups, or it can even be like delays that we have with school, or issues finding documents. Like I said, make sure you have travel insurance. Mercury and Sagittarius opposite Jupiter and Gemini can be like having issues with certain documents, legal documents, travel documents, whatever. It can be like, I wouldn't say losing the documents, but I would say more so you have to like redo certain documents with that opposition. And all of a sudden it triggers like this like frustration, which is that Sun in Scorpio, um, opposite Uranus and Taurus, which is like, I had to pay extra to redo this and I don't have the money for it right now. Something like that is what I think we can expect. We have the Hierophant for Saturday. Like I said at the beginning of this video, find your calm. You are the rock against which the surf crashes. There we go. That's the line. I am the rock against which the surf crashes. I knew I'd get it. That is the Hierophant. Um, Unyielding but peaceful, finding that calm, not letting people shake you, even if it's not people. The things that are going to be thrown at you by that Uranus Sun opposition, that can also be like that Sun Uranus opposition can also be like randomly getting sick as well. But I just wanted to state that. But the Hierophant is also like, what are we committed to? So much of this week is about relationships and how we're handling them. Are we committed to making sure that those relationships are of quality, or are we just trying to get to the end result and we're not really caring about the little details in between? Because this week is kind of brutal, guys. So really just finding your calm, finding something to study or to focus on, keeping the mind and body busy, and finding that calm. Even like meditation with the Hierophant is good, not just for Saturday, but for the whole week as well. I think it's something that could be very beneficial as well. But with that being said, that is your tarot and astro weather for the week of November 11th. Like I said, I'm sorry that I was late, but I do appreciate everyone's patience on me getting this out, and I hope that it was helpful. Like I always say, feel free to like, share a comment. Let me know how you're doing leading up to this full moon in Taurus. What are you expecting for yourself? What are you hoping to get out of it? Are you a Taurus rising or even a Libra rising? It's your time to shine during this upcoming, or even Capricorn risings, since Capricorn rising here, Venus is in our sign. And so it can be a very advantageous time for Capricorn risings in particular. But are you a Taurus rising? Are you Libra rising? Are you a Capricorn rising? Let me know down in the comments. Other than that, I will talk to you guys later. Bye.